Whoa.
I'm all done.
Is this the gift exchange that we're
Are
doing?
you ready? You want
Yeah.
me to go first?
Yeah, let's see it.
Okay, close your eyes. Ta-da!
Wow, those stitches are unbelievable. How did you get that tension on the back too?
I just got it perfect on my machine. I don't know.
That
Are you
looks
done with
amazing.
yours?
Yeah, I just finished it a couple minutes ago.
Okay.
Take a look.
Wow, that's nice. How did you get it to do that on the back?
Yeah, it's a koozie. It's supposed to lay on that side, so you actually don't see those stitches.
Oh.
So I figured it didn't matter because I can't figure it out. But you know, yeah.
I'll show you how to fix it.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Hey guys, it's David from Gigi's Fabric Shop, home to Juki and Janome Junkies. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to achieve the perfect tension on any sewing machine out there. And as you can see, I gifted Boki a koozie with horrible stitch quality and bad tension. So I'm going to show you how to fix this and understand how to have that perfect crisp and clean stitch and tension on any sewing machine. So all of the tension tips and tricks we give you in this video to achieve the perfect tension is going to apply for all different types of sewing machines. So just because you don't see your sewing machine up here, don't worry. What we give you in this video and the information we provide will apply to all sewing machines. Industrial, mechanical, computerized, and all of the different brands out there. So we're going to break down this video into 4 different steps. Number 1 being the functionality and the terminology of all of the tension controls. Maybe it's your first time using a sewing machine, or maybe you're really experienced but you don't know the terms and names of each little component that play a role into your tension. The next thing we're going to talk about is outside factors. Believe it or not, tension is not always just adjusting your tension knobs. It's actually sometimes the material you're using, or the thread you're using, or the needle you're using, or all of the different outside factors. Maybe your machine's not clean. All of those different steps. The third thing we're going to talk about is going to be how to identify what needs to change to get that perfect tension. So understanding what adjustments are needed to get that tension that you want and desire. And the fourth thing is going to be how to actually make those adjustments. So we're going to show you how to adjust that tension on your mechanical and your computerized machines to achieve the perfect tension you've been wanting and looking for. Terminology. Let's break down the terminology. First, let's understand what tension actually is. So tension is where your upper thread and your bobbin thread are meeting at the perfect tension to give you that beautiful stitch quality. And what is beautiful stitch quality? Well, boom, look at that stitch quality. You can see those individual humps. My mom likes to call them dinosaur humps. And those are the stitches you're looking for on your project. You want that top stitch to look crisp and beautiful, so when you give them that gift, they're like, wow, this is perfect. And they don't go, wow, what are those loops on the bottom, right? So we want to achieve the perfect tension. I like to explain tension. I've actually heard somebody else mention this before, where it's like two people or people playing tug of war. You've got like 6 guys over here and like 3 guys over here. They're going to be beating this side, right? So you want to have an even amount of tension on both sides. So you'd want like 6 guys on each side pulling on it, and now the rope is just staying in the same spot. So that's kind of how tension is. You want the upper and the lower to kind of meet in the middle to achieve that perfect tension. So that way there's not one side that's poking through or one side that's pulling too much. You want it to be nice and even. So that's what tension is. The next thing we want to break down is the terminology of your upper tension unit. So on this machine, we have a TL here. This is a mechanical machine. Industrial machines will look very similar to this as far as their upper tension unit. This is going to be your upper tension unit. You're going to see that there's an adjustment here. You can rotate it right and left, and you're going to see that there's little numbers there that kind of indicate more tension and less tension. The lower the number, less the tension. The higher the number, the more the tension. So that is your upper tension unit. The next step is going to be your bobbin case. This is your bobbin case. This is your bobbin. So the bobbin is the little metal piece right here, and the bobbin case is this piece right here. And over here on a computerized machine, our upper tension unit is actually going to be right here, this dial. And computerized machines have automatic tension, so sometimes you don't even have to make that many adjustments. But here is your upper tension unit on this machine. You can see you can adjust it. The higher the number, the more tension. The lesser the number, the less tension. And then on the computerized machine here, we have the bobbin case that is underneath the stitch plate. Here is the computerized bobbin case, and you'll see that it's much different than a mechanical bobbin case. It is a plastic little piece here, and the bobbin just sits right inside of there. And I'm sure you've, put your bobbin inside the bobbin case many times, but you may not know that this is actually the bobbin case. And on computerized machines, there's not much of an adjustment that's needed on these. They usually come from the factory, already set to the perfect tension for home sewing quilting threads. And here are the stitch plates. These are the stitch plates. The stitch plate is pretty much just that metal piece that goes right over that bobbin case or the hook of your machine. And this is where your needle goes through that little hole there. And oftentimes this is where you break your needles. They hit the edge of the stitch plate, they create nicks on your stitch plate, and that's when it's time to change them out. So this is your stitch plate. So now let's talk about functionality, since we've gone over all of the terminology when talking about tension. So your upper tension unit is going to actually be playing a role on the bottom of your material. So if you are sewing along and the top looks beautiful and you're like, it looks great, and then you flip it over and you have those loops, or it looks like a straight line, or it looks anything like this example here, then you know that your upper tension is having issues and you need to make adjustments on the top. Now, if you're sewing along and the top looks like a straight line, kind of like this example, just super straight line, there's no definition, but the bottom looks good, then we know that our bobbin tension most likely needs to be adjusted. So now that we understand what tension unit plays a role in the stitches, now we can actually go over the outside factors and what causes your tension to look bad other than just your tension units. Because oftentimes it's not just your tension units that need to be adjusted. There's outside factors that play a big role in tension. So this is going to be huge, the outside factors that play a role in tension. There's going to be a lot to list, so I'm just going to go quick, okay? So we have old thread. Bad thread brands, old thread, it's been sitting in a garage, the spool's just like, you unwind it, it just like curls up, it's just bad thread, or it's just really cheap thread. We're not going to name any names, but there's bad thread out there. Then we're going to talk about needles. Needles can play a huge role in your tension. Using too big of a needle with too small of thread, that's huge. We're actually going to throw in the description of this video a chart that's going to tell you what needle sizes you should use with what materials and what needle sizes you should use with what weights of threads, because matching your needle size with the material and the threads thickness that you're using is very important. So check the description of this video because we have a PDF chart that we're going to pop up in there. And also we have a full video going over needles. It's called a needle talk video, and Boki recorded it. She did a phenomenal job explaining all of the different types of needles you can use in your sewing machine to help you achieve the perfect stitches. So that's a really, really big factor. The next thing is going to be burrs on your needle plates. So if you've been breaking needles and you have little tiny holes and nicks on your stitch plates, here's an example of one. You can see there's little burrs on that stitch plate. That can play a huge role in getting bad stitches. We actually have a full video on skip stitching. So if maybe your tension looks good, but you're getting those skip stitching and you're watching this video thinking it'll help, well, actually that's going to be something that's going to be pretty much just skip stitching. So click on that video. We'll put a little link to it somewhere in the description or in the video, and watch that video because we're going to talk about all of the issues that can cause the skip stitching. The next thing that plays an outside role factor is a dirty machine. If your machine's dirty, your tension is never going to look good because you have all these little lint balls and dust balls in the tension unit. You can see them just jammed up in there, and that means that your tension's not going to look good. So make sure your machine's clean. Make sure the bobbin case is clean. Make sure there's no lint and debris in the bobbin case. Those are going to play a huge role in making sure that your tension's going to come out nice. The next thing is probably the biggest thing is not having your machine threaded properly. If your machine isn't threaded properly, then you're definitely not going to get good tension. Oftentimes, people will thread their machines with their foot down, and they don't know how to floss the thread through the tension disc, and so the thread's not even in the tension disc, causing your tension to look bad. So the best thing you can do is really just thread your machine with the foot up, or when you're threading that machine and you're going through that tension disc, if your foot is down, you can see here I'm actually flossing it through and making sure it's seated deep into that tension disc. And those tension discs are those two little metal flaps, kind of looks like those, I forgot, what are those things called? What are they called? I don't know. But anyways, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's just two metal plates that are like, that's what your tension disc look like, and you want to make sure that the thread is just sandwiched in there. I'll throw a little example up of what tension discs look like and how it's important to make sure that that thread is seated deeply in those tension discs, because if it's not, your tension's not going to look good. So that is a huge thing. But also check out videos on how to thread your machine and just ensure, or look at your user manual and ensure that you're threading it properly, because that's literally one of the biggest factors in having good stitch quality or good tension is going to be threading your machine properly. The next thing is going to be a bad spool cap. So you could maybe have a spool cap on your computerized, on machines that have the thread that stands up like this. You really don't need a spool cap because it just flows off freely, pretty easy. But on a computerized machine like this, it's important that you're matching the correct spool cap with the correct spool that you have. If it's the wrong size spool cap, that can cause an inconsistent feeding of your thread, causing your tension to not look good. So remember, bad spool caps or the wrong size spool caps are really, really important. Also, sometimes there can be like little cuts or nicks in your spool cap that catches your thread, or maybe along the threading path, there's like a little tiny burr on one of the thread guides and it's catching that thread. Inspect your machine for those little small issues, because those are outside factors that'll play a huge role in making sure your tension's properly ready to go. The next thing that I wanted to mention is materials. I had a customer not too long ago reach out to me, and she was like, well, why is my stitch quality not looking good? There's like, it just doesn't look good. Well, the material she was using with the needle she was using, it was like pushing the material out in a weird way. Like the threads were just pushing out of the actual material itself, and that was covering the actual stitches. So the stitch quality looked bad. But it was really just, the needle was just pushing on this material that she was using. It was like a bonded nylon. What kind of material was that? It was like a canvas that was just, maybe it wasn't the best brand, and the needle was just puncturing it and causing it to have all these little fluffies that were pushing out of the material itself, and it was covering up the stitches and making the stitch quality look bad. And it wasn't really her tension on her machine, it was just, maybe it was the wrong needle for the material she was using. So that's another outside factor that plays a huge role. So now that we've gone over all of the outside factors and we've ruled out all of those, we know that we do need to make a tension adjustment on our machine. So we're going to start off with a mechanical machine. This will apply to all of those mechanical industrials or those home sewing mechanical machines. So if you have a bobbin case that looks like this, and you have a mechanical machine that has a manual adjustment for your tension on your upper, you are going to be following these steps and it's going to apply to your machine. So we just sewed out a small piece here, and after we sewed out this piece, we see it looks like a straight line on the top. Well, since the top looks bad, we know we need to make adjustments on our bobbin case. So if it's a straight line, we know that we need to actually tighten up that bobbin case. And in doing that, all you're going to do is you're going to grab your small little T-screw. You can find these on JukiJunkies.com. And you're just going to turn this flat, recessed flathead screw on your bobbin case to the right. So you're going to turn it righty-tighty, and you're just going to do about a quarter turn. And that's all you need. And then you're going to test sew again and check your tension. If it's still not good, then you're going to make a little bit more of adjustment until it starts looking better. Now, if you've adjusted it and you've done this drop test and it's just way too tight, it feels like it's really, really tight, then you most likely need to just loosen your upper tension a little bit. So sometimes you have to kind of meet them in the middle. It's not always just the bobbin case that needs to be adjusted. It might be the top that needs to be adjusted a little bit. So what I like to do when setting up my tension on a mechanical machine is I like to actually do my bobbin case first. So set my tension on my bobbin case first. So I would take the bobbin case out of the machine. I'd put the bobbin in there. And it's important that you're putting your bobbin in correctly. The thread should fall down on that right side, making a 9. And you should insert it into the bobbin case like so, making that thread go into that little groove, falling right there. And then I like to do my drop test. So I'll pull up my bobbin case like this, and I'll just jiggle the thread just like this. And if it's not dropping, then it's too tight. So then we need to loosen it a little bit. And I'll show you what I like my tension to look like on this kind of bobbin case. Okay, so I pull it up and it drops. But this is too loose because when I pull it up, it just drops on its own. So you can see it's just too loose. I'm not really doing anything. I'm just pulling and it's dropping. So I want to make it where I pull it up and it goes up. And then if I just do a little jerk and I drop it a little bit quicker, there you go. So that's what I like it to look like. I like to just give it a little bit of a drop like that. And that's how I know my tension's looking good. So now that we've made our adjustment on our bobbin case and we have the tension set up perfectly, we went ahead and sewed out a sample here. And now the top tension looks good. You can see that it has nice defined stitches here, but when you flip it over, the bottom looks bad. And so here's 3 different examples of bottom looking bad. You have the looping, which is the extreme bad upper tension, and then you have just, lines or just undefined stitches here. And sometimes the top will actually have, loose stitches if the top, if the upper tension is just that loose. Sometimes it'll even affect the top. So if we have looping on the bottom, there's 2 factors that can be playing a role in having bad lower stitch tension. It can either be your tension disc are not closing all the way, or it's a dirty machine, or when you threaded it, it went behind those 2 tension discs and it's not seated properly in the tension disc. So what I like to do to troubleshoot that and figure out how to make sure that we have our upper tension working properly is I'll just have the machine threaded normally, but I'll lift up the foot so my tension disc will actually separate, because when you lift up your foot, your tension disc actually separates. So when you make adjustments on your upper tension unit, your foot always has to be down. You cannot make these adjustments with your foot up. So what I'll do is I'll lift up my foot and I'll pull my thread, and I can see that it's pulling nice and smooth and easy. It pulls nice and easy, right? But then when I put my foot down, my tension disc closed, and now it should be much harder to pull because now my tension is actually engaged. So now I'm pulling on it, and you can see my needle's actually moving quite a bit, and I know that I have tension. But if you were having that looping on the bottom, more than likely you'll lift up your foot and it'll be nice and easy, and you'll put your foot down, it'll still be nice and easy, because that means your upper tension is not working properly. So the first thing I would do is I'd rethread my machine, make sure it's seated in there properly, or visually inspect my tension disc and make sure they're closing all the way. And once you have got that fixed, that looping should go away, because you should now have tension on your upper tension unit. If you can't figure it out on your own, bring it to a certified technician, and they'll be able to troubleshoot your upper tension disc a little bit better and figure out what's going on with that unit that's causing it to not close properly and give you that tension. Now, if it's just a line like this tension, or this stitch here, just not a defined stitch, then all you have to do is just increase that upper tension to give you that defined stitch and give you those beautiful stitches that we have here, where you can see it's individual crispy stitches on the top and individual crispy stitches on the bottom. You can see nice individual stitches. So that's what you would do. You would just adjust your top to kind of fix that bottom. Now keep in mind, sometimes you'll be making these adjustments on your machines and you'll see, you're like, well, David, I can't get the stitch quality to look good because my top is tightened down all the way and my bottom's tightened down. It's like they're both really tight. Sometimes when you're sewing and you've already made that adjustment to the top or the bottom and it's not changing it, sometimes you actually have to just loosen both of them up a little bit and kind of meet them in the middle a little bit. So like I said, I always like to start with my bobbin case, then I'll start with my top. But sometimes if your top stitch is not looking good and you've made those adjustments on the bobbin case, you know your bobbin case is right, then maybe you just have to loosen up your top a little bit to kind of meet the bobbin case in the middle. It's not always going to be just the bobbin case that controls the top. Sometimes you have to loosen the upper tension unit to actually help that bobbin case start pulling it down, because if you know you set your bobbin case tension right, then you know that your upper tension either needs to be tightened or loosened to help meet that in the middle. One other quick little thing that I wanted to mention is if you are comfortable setting your tension on your bobbin case on your own by just doing the drop test, that's great. But if you want a very consistent way of measuring your bobbin case tension, you can get this TOA gauge, and you actually put your bobbin case with the bobbin in the TOA gauge. You put it around this little wheel here, and you put it around this wheel, and you can actually pull the thread like this, and it'll tell you a number that your bobbin case tension is set to, and then that way you can be very consistent. This is great for the person that's going back and forth between threads. When you're switching between different weights or different material threads, your tension will be changed on mechanical machines. So if you go from a polyester to a cotton, your tension is going to have to be adjusted a little bit, because polyester is a smoother thread. Cotton is a much it's not as smooth as polyester. If you're going with a thicker thread like a Tex 45 or a Tex 70, you are going to probably have to loosen or maybe even tighten your bobbin case. And we have a full video on using industrial threads on these sewing machines and how to make sure your tension is set up for that. One other thing I wanted to talk about is puckering. If you're sewing and your tension is super tight on the top or super tight on the bottom, and you're using very fine materials and you're getting this puckering and it's just puckering up the material like that, you need to loosen your bobbin case and your upper tension to kind of help loosen up that tension, because it's just causing your material to pucker. So if you're getting this puckering, you can try making your stitch length a little bit smaller. That usually helps if you can do that with that certain project. Or you could just loosen up your top tension and loosen up your bobbin tension a little bit. Because you're using a finer material, you might actually have to loosen up those tensions so you don't get that puckering. So now that we've gone over the mechanical machines, we're going to have Boki talk about computerized machines and how to make those adjustments and how to identify the adjustments needed to make your tension look good on your computerized machine. Don't forget, we are JukiJunkies.com. So if you're looking for any Juki accessories or a brand new Juki, check out JukiJunkies.com. We have a link in the description of this video, and we ship extremely fast, so check it out.
Alright, you guys, so now I'm going to hop in and talk about what tension and tension issues look like on a computerized machine, because things are a little different in this world, because most of the time you have a bobbin case that is just something like this little guy, and there's no adjusting like David was just showing you on the mechanical machine. So this is not something you're going to constantly be adjusting and readjusting. Most brands offer bobbin cases like this with higher tension or lower tension. Specifically in the Juki world, they do have another bobbin case that you could purchase that is a low tension bobbin case. So I'll talk about when you would want to use something like that, but let's first address how do you adjust tension on a machine like this. So a lot of your issues with tension, first thing is going to be looking at those outside factors. So all the things David listed about needles and thread and spool caps and cleaning and the big checklist of things before we just start turning and dialing things left and right, you're going to want to go through those things first, because 90% of the time it's an outside factor causing those problems. So even, cleaning your machine could be causing tension issues. So definitely go through that list first. All else fails and you still have tension issues and it's really coming down to the thread, you're going to have to start doing those adjustments. Out of the factory, most of these computerized styled machines have like this auto tension dial that's right here, and these machines are typically set for standard home sewing style threads. 40 weight, 50 weight, usually even 60 is not going to give you a problem. Once you start getting out of that realm of like 40, 50, 60, that's when you might start noticing things that you have to change, especially specialty types of threads. Metallic thread can be a little hard to work with because it's just so kind of gritty. It's almost like aluminum. Working with invisible thread, I know a lot of you guys like that. That's a very stretchy type of thread, so you're going to have to make adjustments. So when you're starting to work with those specialty types of really thick, really thin, unique types of threads, that's when you might have to start making those adjustments. So depending on your machine, finding where you can adjust your top tension is going to be up here. Most of those adjustments can be done on that machine, and that's going to affect your tension a lot. Working with the right needle is going to play into those specialty types of threads as well. That's a big factor. Like if you're working with something very thick or very thin, you need to make the proper adjustment for that. But now down to the bobbin case. Well, Boki, I can't adjust the bobbin case. I can only adjust the top. How do I balance that out? It's that game of tug of war, right? Meeting the top to the bottom. So rarely are you ever going to need to do anything to the bobbin, only in the instances of like free motion quilting. You're going to want to purchase the low tension bobbin case because the tension's just different in that style of quilting. If you're working with like cording or invisible thread and you want to like free motion quilt with it, or if you're working with a really thick style thread like a 30 weight or for example like a Tex 40, you want to do that low tension bobbin case because it's going to alleviate that pressure from the bottom to the top, and then you'll have to go to the top and make those changes. But let's say you're working with like something a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner, you can always adjust up here accordingly or wherever that is on your machine and play with it that way, and then just make sure the rest of your recipe kind of matches up. So thread and all that good stuff. So on this machine, adjusting tension is very, very different. It's more automatic, you're not really going to be using so many specialty things. And that's something to consider when you're looking at purchasing your next machine. If you work with specialty threads and you feel like you want to have more control, you kind of want to go for something like a mechanical machine because there is so much more hands-on adjusting and controls that you can do. So just something to consider when adjusting tension on this machine. And if you feel like you need more control, think about that in your next one. All right, last little thing I want to cover about computerized sewing machines, especially if you have decorative stitches, which most of them do. There is that issue of running into perfect tension when you're working on decorative stitches because the machine's kind of doing like an embroidery style concept. In embroidery, I won't dive into it super deep, but the tension isn't 50-50. So to accommodate when you're doing decorative stitches, especially fonts, beautiful like appliques, and the machines have all kinds of cool things nowadays, you want to make sure you're giving those stitches stabilization. So putting enough layers, using the right needle, stabilizing it enough, and making any adjustments, maybe adding some tension or decreasing it depending on what you're working on. That's really important to remember because decorative stitches it sucks up more fabric and more thread. And then last thing I want to mention really quickly is about the zigzag stitches. So zigzag stitches, of course, kind of fall under that decorative stitch category, so make those changes accordingly. Fabric has a big play into this. If you're working with very giving fabric, jerseys, knits, and things like that, make sure you're using the appropriate zigzag stitch for that and making those adjustments as you need. So a lot of different things play into stitches. Stitches, need to be leveled out, so just make sure the stuff that you're feeding the machine is stabilized enough to make your stitches crisp enough.
Well, just like that, I hope we were able to help you achieve that perfect tension on your sewing machine. If you guys have any questions on these topics, please drop them down in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to help you out. Also, join the Juki Junkies Facebook group where you can post all of your questions on there, and we can actually interact with you a little bit more and see videos, and all of our friends can help comment and figure out your tension issues. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Give us a like, drop those comments down below, and hit that subscribe button because we post every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. See you next time.